All right, good afternoon, and welcome to the Joy Meets Pain podcast. I am your host, Dorcas, and I have here with me.
Happy. Lovely to be back here. Hi.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So, we are in February, and as we had mentioned at the beginning of this year, we are going to be incorporating national, international holidays in some of our conversations. So, obviously, as we all know, February is all about love, right? In addition to being Black History Month, it is also the holiday of love, right? So, today we are focusing primarily on Valentine's Day, and we'll also touch on Singles Day. What is Singles Day? Why is it important? Right. So just quick, brief summary of Valentine's Day. I think we all know it's a holiday about love and showing love, expressing love, giving love, buying love, doing love, whatever it is, right? But it has, an interesting history behind it, which of course has to do with religion and power and men, right? So, there was a Roman emperor, Claudius II, who had put in place this rule that Roman soldiers could not get married. And so a priest, Valentine, conducted marriages in secret. And of course, that was not taken very well by the Roman emperor. And so story ends anyway. The priest refused to renounce his faith and he was beheaded. Right. But fast forward, I mean, there are so many different versions of the history of Valentine. Some of it for sure indicating just abuse of women when we think about the Lupercalia Festival, and the need to, whip women, abuse them in order for fertility to happen. So horror stories, but to me, again, it always boils down to either there's religion involved, men in power involved, and who's making the rules about these holidays? What becomes a holiday? Who names it a holiday? How is the holiday celebrated? But thanks to English poet Geoffrey Chaucer, who wrote a poem, Parliament of Fowls, and in there he included the line, right? For this was on St. Valentine's Day, when every bird comes there to choose his mate match, right? And so we now know that obviously Valentine's Day became first romantic holiday about choosing a Valentine, asking someone to be your Valentine. Cadbury's chocolate company, marketed this idea and started creating hot boxes, in which chocolate was sold. And so you could keep these boxes as souvenirs. But fast forward to where we are now. So in the US in 2025, Valentine's Day, spending for Valentine's Day was $27.5 billion dollars. And this is according to Statistica. So, Taffy, what stats did you find on Valentine's Day spending in the UK?
So for the UK, it's at between 1.2 to 1.5 billion.
Wow. So pretty
Yeah.
significant.
But but yeah, America is crazy. I'm flabbergasted.
Yeah, yeah, well, we love to show love for sure. All right, and so it is not obviously just a holiday. It has become an industry. You know, flowers and jewelry and dining and jewelry and travel and hotels and you name it. Um, and we actually know that it is banned in some countries, right? Malaysia, for example. I know there are others, but in some countries, it's actually not allowed to be celebrated as a holiday. right? And so, unfortunately, I think if we think about this from a psychological perspective, it's sending the message that if you love me, you'll buy me such and such. You know, if I only receive flowers and not jewelry and not, and, something expensive or fantastic, then it means, maybe I'm not loved enough, right? So all of these messages are passed on just from this holiday that was started in such a ridiculous manner anyway. So I guess Taffy, touch on why do you think it works psychologically, this idea of, you know, giving and receiving in order to feel loved and accepted?
I think in the age of social media in particular, it's because then you get to take the photos, you get to take the reel and you get to put it on social media as a way to show other people like, look, this is what my person did for me. And I think also psychologically it's about how if we compare to the phenomenon of people that are not in relationships feeling like they're missing out on something, so I think it's that similar feeling of, you know, um I'm in this relationship, so I have to perform, and we need to look like we love each other, and that's how
Right.
you show someone that you them. And so I think that's why it works psychologically, because it sort of reinforces the idea that you have to perform for love. You have to show everyone as well that, oh, I'm loved, I'm in this relationship, etc., etc. So it's very kind of surface level, as is with
Yes,
many things.
absolutely. And I mean, I can say a whole lot about this idea of showing love in this way, right? One of the things that comes to mind for me is love languages. Now, this is another sort of product that's being marketed because people live by the love languages, right? And so Valentine's Day falls in line for those whose love language is receiving gifts. Fantastic, right? But what if you have a partner who does not believe in giving gifts? Then what, right? It creates a challenge in that way. The other issue is if I feel inadequate as an individual, right, then I am looking to a relationship to make me feel whole, to make me feel complete, right? And so again, I'm always looking for expecting somebody else to do these things that are going to make me feel meaningful, cared for, loved, and so on and so on. And so it sort of sends the wrong message because there's so much anticipation that builds around Valentine's Day. And, the reality is, we all know that love is hard, right? It's not just, on this day, we're spending all this money and doing all of these great things. It takes a lot of work to make love work well and to last long, right? Now, there are shortcuts that we can take to simplify that, but generally speaking, we've been in relationships, right? So we recognize that love takes work and it goes beyond, just celebrating Valentine's Day, right? So what makes love so hard? You want to take over?
Yeah. I think what makes love hard is, I don't know if you know the saying, and I think there's a song by John Mayer, love is a verb. And so it's a love is something that is meant to be. an
Right.
action
Act. Yes.
through how you treat someone, how you, and this is not just based on one day, but over a long period of time. And I think in between the grand moments are just the ordinary, very ordinary, boring things. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where the real stuff happens, as opposed to a birthday or a Valentine's Day or Christmas or, a family celebration. And it's hard because in those moments, I think it's easy to just become complacent, or if we look at maybe arguments, or if two people live together, you now have to navigate, living with another person, communication. And so it's all the the things that require energy that
Right.
are not as easy as giving someone a gift, learning to communicate, learning to take accountability when, things don't go right, learning to share responsibility and to support each other, learning to hold space when, maybe someone is having a difficult time. And I think those are the things that accumulate to form what a relationship is. And
Yeah.
those things are hard. I mean, we see
Yes.
that even in our friendships, in our relationships with family. And I think the closer someone is, the harder they are to love. People are really easy to love from a love from a distance, because
Mm-hmm.
there's space, so you don't get to see
Right.
all their shit like over
Yes.
here.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, why, yeah.
Yes. So I think when you talked about loving people from a distance, yes, I think that is the fantasy, right? So when you see each other, it's so intense, it's so romantic, it's wonderful because you're not seeing each other often, you're not around each other often, right? But when you are doing that day in, day out work, it is not easy at all. And why is real love hard? Right? Because it is very easy to buy a rose. It's easy to buy a card. It's easy to do all of those things, right? But some of the things that we cannot buy is that emotional connection, right? We cannot buy accountability, right? We cannot buy a secure attachment. And so, these are things that we have to work on as an individual and also in a relationship to actually build it and to make it work, right? And so, while Valentine's Day is, all about romance, and it actually has changed now, it's become more, friendships and siblings and it just love. It's a love holiday, right? And so while it celebrates that kind of love, it really doesn't celebrate like building relationship skills, right? And so, why is it that um, we are willing to splurge on love, but yet it is difficult to sustain, right? Because again, I think it falls into people believing that if I do this, I will receive this. And unfortunately, in some relationships, there's also the belief of men, okay, Valentine's Day is coming, I'm gonna buy all these wonderful gifts and things, and I may get lucky and I may get laid, right? So there's this anticipation that builds, there's so much expectation there, you know, and people will think, okay, this one day is going to solve the problems or the arguments we've had in the past week. Okay, well, Valentine's coming. You can make up for it, on Valentine's Day or whatever. And so it really creates a false sense of security in a relationship, right? And so the challenge is that it's difficult to sustain true love because it requires that consistent work that you talked about. Many people also were just never taught uh, how to really love or to understand what that looks like, right? And many of us also now just struggle with staying very emotionally present. And those are the very moments that you are talking about, right? So while we can celebrate it on February 14th, the purpose is we still want to stay connected the other 364 days a year, right? In those small moments, we still want to remain connected. So let's quickly touch on Singles Day because it's also, you know, around Valentine's Day and it's become a huge holiday celebration. Are you familiar with it? Had you heard about it? Is there anything you know about Singles Day?
I think I've heard about it, but to be honest, I always kind of assumed it's one of those days. You know how over time every day is an international day of something. So I just
Yes.
thought someone woke up and did it. But is there a history behind it?
Well, supposedly it was started in China by some university students. I mean, I haven't done my research to really get the true history of it, but this is what I heard, right? But what I've come to know about Singles Day is it's a way for people who are single to celebrate their independence, their freedom, their space, right? And so again, we live in a society where relationships have always been valued, promoted. People live and die for relationships. If you are not married, you are considered, you know, just failing at life, or and so Singles Day is promoting people who are truly happy to be single, who recognize the freedom that comes with being single, right? And everything else that is a blessing and an opportunity when you think about what it means to be single. Right. So, yeah, so I think it's important for people to see both sides of the coin where celebrate people who are single that are they happy to be single? I think that's the number one question because not everyone is, right? Society still sends us a lot of
Yeah.
messages that there is something wrong with you if you're not in a relationship. And this is why many people will die in horrible relationships because I have to be in a relationship because society tells me to do that. Right. So again, it has been commercialized by some companies, organizations like Alibaba, the website or the platform, shopping platform. It's huge shopping day, Singles Day, right? And it's supposedly even bigger than Black Friday or Monday combined, which is interesting. I think I would love to do more research on that fact. Because I don't hear a lot of people talking about Singles Day as much as I do hear people talking about Valentine's Day. Right. But why do you think it is important, Taffy?
I think it's important because it, like you said, it celebrates or it encourages people to celebrate their freedom, their autonomy, their space, and I think oftentimes when the messaging is, oh, being in a relationship is an achievement, having being married is an achievement, or whatever else, I think the people that are not in relationships or in romantic relationships feel like they are behind, they feel like there's something wrong with them, or they're not enough, or they're broken. And so I think it's important to reframe it and to
Mm-hmm.
look at it as, um, to celebrate, like, the freedom of I'm single, and this means, I get to do this, I get to decide how I want to set my life up. If you live alone, you have the freedom of, setting up your home how you want to set it up without worrying about considering another person. And even the very act of having to consider another person consistently when you're in a relationship, when you're single, you can just make decisions and you can
Right,
be on your way. If your friends say tomorrow, let's go to China, you can,
right.
if you got the money, you can go. You don't have to ask anyone for permission.
Yeah,
And so I think there is a lot to be said about both cases, and I think it's
yes.
important to shine a light on being single as much as there's many things great about being in a relationship as well.
Yes, 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 absolutely. Being single means you also have a lot more to pour into yourself, right? So I can love myself fully, but I think also if we talk about love, relationships, what is most important, again, from family systems, being able to balance individuality and togetherness. And so if I feel secure in
Mhm.
who I am as an individual and I get into a relationship with someone, I'm able to balance the two in a way where one does not supersede the other, right? And so again, I think it's for people to assess. Am I clingy in a relationship? Do I expect my partner to meet all of my needs, right? Or do I feel like I'm able to do most of that on my own as well, right? So that self-love is really key because if I also get into a relationship and I have self-love and I feel autonomous, then, there's not so much pressure when it comes to the relationship. And so contrasting points, Valentine's Day, Singles Day, right? Valentine's Day can send the message that you must prove your love to me through things, right? Through gifts, right? And Singles Day is saying, well, who are you without an audience, right? There's no one to buy and prove their love. So, do I feel whole and complete as an individual? So I think I like those contrasting points there. Right. So when we start to think about families,
Mhm.
again, this is a podcast about family systems and the families we come from, right? Some of the questions that we can discuss relating to families, right? So what do families teach us about worth, about partnership, about being chosen versus choosing? And Tafi, share some of your thoughts about what we learn from our families about worth, partnership, and choosing versus being chosen.
The good, the bad stuff.
It's joy meets pain,
Let's
all of the above.
see. Let me. What do we learn from families about worth? I think if I was to like just approach it from, I guess, the the viewpoint of how most people are raised, I think most many of us were raised or are raised to with the sentiment that you have to perform for love. You have to earn love. If you think back to school, or if you think back to when you were growing up, it was if you did what was perceived to be a good thing, then you would get the praise, you would get the attention. If you got the good grades, you'd get the attention, you'd get the praise. And so I think, while of course not all of it is bad, I think that it reinforces this idea that you have to you have to perform for love. You have to do something in order to be seen, to be heard, to be taken seriously. And I think that's where it starts. And you know, you then find that sometimes when people get older, they still are in that pattern of thinking, oh, if I don't do this thing, then this person won't like me, whether it's in a friendship, whether it's in a relationship, or I'm not worthy until I have proven myself in some shape, way, or form. And I think that bleeds into all of your relationships, whether it's work, whether it's platonic, whether it's romantic relationships. And in looking at the aspect of being chosen versus choosing yourself, um, again, I think it ties in with the self-worth and what you learn at an earlier age, um, whether you have to behave a certain way, you have to adjust yourself in order to be to make the people around you happy. And again, that will be mirrored in how you relate to people later on.
Yeah.
And I think for myself, this is also something that I had to learn over and over again, especially in my 20s, this idea of being chosen or wanting to be chosen, especially in romantic relationships where um, I kept thinking, oh, you know, why isn't this person choosing me, or what's wrong with me, instead of reframing it, do I like this person?
Right,
It's
right,
not about them picking me, it's they fit what I need or what I
right.
require in a relationship for me to
Yeah.
feel safe, for me to be loved. And instead of waiting to be chosen, can do the choosing as well. So
Yes, yes, yes,
yeah.
for sure. Yeah, and the one thing also is we observe how love is displayed, right, by our caregivers, our parents. And if they unfortunately also did not come from families where love was displayed or demonstrated in a healthy way, then we are
Mm.
receiving this messages of this is love, this is not, this is. So unfortunately, our early experiences do shape what love means to us, how it's interpreted. Unfortunately, also, comparing social media now, we can easily see how is love celebrated in the US versus Canada versus here versus there. And so there's so much comparison. Well, in America, they do this and they do that, and my parents didn't do this and do that. So we always have to remember cultures are very different. Just because one culture did something doesn't mean your culture showed love in the same way. But I think the most important point is you have to have felt loved, right? Did I feel loved? Because then it's not about, my parents didn't kiss in front
Mhm.
of me or whatever, but did I see love between them and did they make me feel loved as well? Right. So, you know, the choosing versus chosen, for sure, it has a lot to do with, our attachment styles, our level of confidence, in ourselves. And again, if I feel like I'm worthy of choosing, then I will choose. If I think I'm not worthy, then I'll wait to be chosen. And whoever comes first, I may accept it because I was chosen, right? So it's a difficult dilemma there to address, but it's always recognizing that if I'm not doing the choosing, how confident do I feel in myself about that? So I guess if we think about asking listeners to reflect, right? The first point I will say is think about, do I equate love with intensity or consistency? Um, do I fear being single or being truly known? Um, And how do I show love when no one is watching? I love that last one. Share your thoughts about those three, Tuffy.
Yeah. How do I equate love? Do I equate love with intensity or consistency? So I'm a consistency girly. I'm a consistency. I'm big on intention. Uh, yeah. So I'm I'm much happier with small, consistent acts of care or love versus the sporadic big
Yeah,
grand gestures, whether that's
on
in
Valentine's Day.
romantic relationships and friendships.
Yeah,
Yeah. Exactly. And I think for me personally, I think I value consistency rather than intensity because intensity is too unpredictable for me. Um, and the second one, do I fear being single or being truly known? I think being truly known is a very scary thing. Um, and I think in some aspects, sometimes that makes me a bit uncomfortable sometimes when you can see that someone is really, making an effort to to see you and to hear you. And this reminds me even of like when I go to therapy and I'm speaking to my therapist, and then he just sits there and he stares at me, and I'm like, and I've stopped talking like seconds ago, and he's just sitting and he's just staring at me, and I'm just like, why is he staring at me? I want to crawl into the ground. So I think, that is an example of, how scary it can be to be truly
yeah,
known or to be truly seen. It's
yeah, yeah,
almost like a stripped. It's a form of vulnerability, and I don't like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
um then the last, how do I show love when no one is watching? um But I think again, looping back to the first point, as someone that values intention and consistency, I think I'm that shows love through small daily acts of,
yeah,
care and checking, noticing when, someone is not okay, or remembering the small things. You had an exam last week. You said you had a job interview. How did that go? So I think for me, those are the when no one is watching, you know,
yeah,
just paying attention and, yeah, being intentional. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, I didn't mean to put you on the spot by having you share your own ways, right? But thank you for sharing. I think we appreciate that. And so one thing I will say is consistency is everything, right? Because if I say I truly love someone, then even when we have the worst of fights, I'm going to find a way to work through it with that person, right? So now, I mean, I really have to have a healthy understanding of what love is, what's worth fighting for, what I need to let go of, right? So I am not promoting people who are in abusive relationships to keep fighting for them. We have to be able to recognize and understand what is healthy love, right? Is it taking a toll on me to be in this relationship? But, I think oftentimes people struggle with working through difficult challenges, problems, and an ability to work through those is one thing that can help the love build and grow and last longer, right? And how I show love when no one is watching. Again, this is not the love we want to post on social media, but how are we showing it in small ways on a daily basis, right? Am I actually thinking about that person when I wake up, when I start my day, during my day, because it means they're important to me? Or do I only think about them in the evening at night when I want sex or whatever, right? So, it's important to think about how am I actually showing love when no one is watching? Because again, people will cheat, go behind someone's back, do all these other things, disrespect their partner, call them names and whatever, but in front of them, it's a different story, right? So maintaining that respect, even when the person isn't there, I think is very important. Right, so I do want us to close with a reflection prompt that I think is powerful, and I hope everyone takes the time to think about it. Tafi, do you want to read the closing prompt for us, please?
Yeah. Um, so if love couldn't be posted, purchased, or proven, how would you know it was real?
Okay, I will say it again. If love could not be posted or purchased or proven, how would you know it was real?
Mm.
All right, well, that wraps up our episode on Valentine's Day and Singles Day. And next time we come around, we'll be touching more on the painful side of family life. So stay tuned and thank you for listening and supporting us. All right, Tuffy, stay well and take care and stay present.
Time. Bye.
Bye.